speaker is Deirdre, and she's from CSU Channel Islands.
Hi. Before Thomas Jefferson crafted the words that all men are created equal, women in the American colonies were already questioning this apparent discrepancy between the sexes. In the year 1743, the year Thomas Jefferson was born, a woman we only know by the initials E.R. wrote a poem that was published in the South Carolina Gazette, a newspaper which at the time was owned by a woman. Part of the prose reads, "That equal laws custom find and neither sex oppress, or freedom give to womankind, or to mankind give less." Good afternoon, my name is Deirdre Bence, and today I'm privileged to represent both my school, California State University Channel Islands, and my major, which is history. The title of my research is called Indelible Ink, the ties that bind American females through print media, noting 1776, the date the Declaration of Independence came into being, and 1848, the date the Declaration of Independence was signed at the first Women's Convention in the United States. Now, from the onset of the nation, women had few venues which actually afforded them a voice, let alone a vocation. Historians have coined terms to allow scholars a lens into the subjugated realm of females during this era. The term Republican motherhood is used to define women as the ultimate teacher and instiller of Republican values. The term, the cult of true womanhood, required women to maintain four qualities: purity, piety, submissiveness, and domesticity. And all four were the mark of a true woman. Yet this did not really represent all the women fully in America at this time. Now, few acceptable occupations existed for women outside of the home. However, work in print media was an acceptable occupation for women, allowing women a unique channel between the separate spheres, both public and private. Today, I am presenting a portion of an extensive analysis which examined over 20 women within the realm of print media. I would like to acquaint you with four distinct women today who made their mark by employing the power of the press. Now, history often scrutinizes females as individuals or groups them together based on their combined efforts in a specified era. My research takes a different approach. I argue that women from successive generations can be associated through enterprise. Now, although diverse and working in various decades, I contend that these women are linked through distinctive contributions to the progression of female equality via the venue of print media. Now, during the early Revolutionary War period, print shops consisted of small family-run businesses, sometimes bequeathed to women. Some women chose to become part of this trade, even though it was a trade dominated by men. One such woman I'd like to introduce you to is a Baltimore printer by the name of Mary Catherine Goddard. Now, Goddard excelled at her profession as a printer. In 1775, she became the first postmistress in the colonies, and the only one in an important position after the new government was formed in 1776. Now, at the onset of 1777, Goddard obtained the printing triumph of the 18th century. The Continental Congress commissioned her to produce the first printed version of the Declaration of Independence with all of the signers' names on it, which included her name at the bottom of the document. Now, however, in 1789, she lost her job as postmistress because the new government deemed the position unsuitable for a woman. Over 200 Baltimore businessmen signed a petition to persuade the government to allow her to remain at her post. Goddard herself even sent a plea to George Washington, but it was of no avail. Goddard is central to the dialogue of female equivalency because she excelled in a profession dominated by men, but was yet denied a federal position based solely on her sex. Goddard's experience shows how those separate spheres were starting to become more segregated. And with that segregation, women of the 19th century actually harnessed the power of print media and that separate sphere to express egalitarian issues, and they worked through activism, reform movements, and the writing of pamphlets. It was this woman, a teacher, by the name of Emma Hart Willard, who was an activist and a catalyst for female higher education in America, breaking ground for institutions of learning to be built all over the country. Now, in 1819, she wrote a powerful pamphlet that was lauded by both Jefferson and Adams, and it was entitled, "An Address to the Public, particularly to the members of the New York Legislature or the Legislature of New York, proposing a plan for improving female education, where she averred that among females will be found master spirits who must have their preeminence at whatever the price to acquire it. Domestic life cannot hold these because they prefer to be infamous rather than obscure. Willard conveyed a truth. Women of intellect possess strength of mind and an animate will to use it. They could not be defined solely by that separate sphere. Her pamphlet motivated the city leaders in Troy, New York to fund a women's school in 1819. Willard's campaign had a nationwide effect. Hundreds of women were trained as professional teachers. Many of these teachers went on to take up feminist causes, such as suffrage. Willard herself was a talented scholar. She wrote textbooks on history and geography and even published a book of poetry. Women were now branching into other areas of print media, including the field of journalism. Now, after 1820, women moved away from reading newspapers and started reading magazines. The problem with the magazines was it was catering completely mostly to the domestic sphere. There were few women who used the power of the pen to actually undertake the subjects of politics for gender equality. But this is one I'd like to introduce you to. Her name is Mary Chase Barney. Barney inspired women to think and act outside of their comfort zones and to seek knowledge about the public sphere. In 1830, she invented a avant-garde magazine and served as one of the first women to both publish and edit a periodical which articulated opinions about politics. Barney initially gave her magazine two names. The first, The Ladies' Emporium, would cater to the veneration of domesticity, so popular at this time. The national magazine would actually be the larger portion, and that section offered analysis on public issues, including politics. And as Barney so eloquently stated to her patrons, there are some who regard the sciences, among which they rank government and politics, as too masculine to engage the attention of female writers. No knowledge should be withheld from those who may be wives, mothers, and companions of the hardier sex. She also asked this question: because we have no voice in government, have we no voice in the nation? Barney inspired her readers to develop their own opinions, even when denied access to the public sphere or the ballot box. Barney's important to the dialogue of female equity because she reached women where they were, in the domestic sphere, and she unapologetically challenged them to both think and act outside of it. American women like Barney were now not bound by gender. They were bound by questioning the social constructs facilitating their equality. Women became more vocal through print media, becoming celebrated authors, poets, and editors. And arguably the greatest of these was Margaret Fuller. And here she is. Fuller used her celebrity to advocate equality for women. During her tenure at the New York Tribune, she wrote a book entitled Women of the 19th Century. She articulated opinions about the interaction between the genders. In the initial week of publication, the first edition sold out. Her outspoken feminist viewpoint resonated with the women of 1845 to enact change. And Fuller wrote this: "We would have every arbitrary barrier thrown down. We would have every path laid open to woman as freely as man. When inward and outward freedom for woman, as much as for man, shall be acknowledged as a right, not yielded as a concession." Both leading suffragists, Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton, credit Fuller with their voting rights activism. They stated that she possessed more influence upon the thought of America than any woman previous to her time. Now, in 1848, both women and men gathered at the Seneca Falls, New York, for a convention which galvanized the women's rights movement in the United States. Its hallmark was a document, the Declaration of Rights. It professed universal suffrage and equity between the sexes. This document also represents the body of work contributed by the women of print media to the narrative of female identity. Their evident connection to each other in the cause of feminine sameness is the basis for this project. Taking ownership of their unique roles within the industry, I argue that they created a generational linkage of female equality through the power of the pen, leaving their mark in indelible ink. And thank you. You wanted to know about it. So,
Okay, questions from the jurors?
When you look back on your wonderful presentation, is there anything you could have suggested to advance and accelerate the introduction participation and growth of women in the workplace, including economical equality?
It's interesting you say that because print media had been around for long before we even were a nation. And women were actually able to own businesses. They actually inherited them or they inherited them even, yeah, small ones, exactly. But like, for example, Mary Catherine Goddard, it was Benjamin Franklin who actually recommended her to the Continental Congress because her work was so good. So the problem was that those things weren't open to women. They were open to single women and they were open to widowed women. Mostly married women weren't permitted to own businesses. That was what was problematic about it.
So does that mean that there's, that you accept what has happened and how it happened, and that there aren't other factors, if you had the choice of throwing them in back then, that would improve the situation, that you can't think of any?
I guess, if you can rephrase your question for me, I'm not sure I'm understanding your question.
Oh, as you look back on this, and what you're saying, is there, I get the impression that what happened was destined to happen and they couldn't have been improved upon in any other which way.
You mean as far as
The
become, as
path
far of
women,
being equality?
yeah,
But the
going into the work.
Right, but the interesting thing was they all came at it from a different angle. They all had their own motivations toward equality. What one woman's aspect of equality was for herself or for women is completely different from another woman. So the interesting thing was all those different opinions were actually articulated through print media. So women got a diversity of opinions about things, reform movements, for example, orphanages, education, all different things, as well as voting rights. So women really in the nation were able to read, take things in, articulate their own viewpoints. And I think that, you're right, that was the trajectory that led to it.
So if you take this part of one woman with another part of another woman and put them together, then things could have been different.
Yeah, I think eventually a sisterhood did develop, you know?
Yeah.
But that's a wonderful question, thank you for that.
Nice presentation.
Oh, thank you very much.
And I like the way you transition from one lady to the next lady. It's very smart, and I can tell you put a lot of thought into it.
Thank you very much, it's very kind, appreciate it.
I don't have any questions, I just want to.
Okay. Anybody, questions?
I was gonna skip right because you did really good.
Oh,
Historically, but what made you decide to focus on specifically print media?
the reason I focused on print media is actually what's got me started. You know, we all have a germ, a seed that gets us going with research projects, don't we? There's something, one question that's bothering us. And Mary Catherine Goddard was the person that was bothering me because she really lived in incognito with her newspaper. Everything was M.K. Goddard, so no one knew if she was a woman or not. But when she put her name on the bottom of that Declaration of Independence, and she was such a patriot, had done broadsides for the cause of liberty, and she had the guts to put her name on the bottom of that document, I knew that women were trying to voice their opinion some way. And the way that they were going to voice it was through the power of the press. And however they could articulate that, whether it was through pamphlets or writing poetry or whatever it happened to be. And that's really kind of what got me excited about it and got me started. And I really tried to focus continually on the early republic because it was such a diverse change in what was happening within the print industry at that time. Does that answer your question? Okay. Am I done?
You're done, thank you.